The thick velvet ribbon around his throat wasn't a fashion statement. It was the only thing keeping the nightmares locked inside, and tonight, the devil himself was staring right at it. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy dark romance, suspense, and stories where love rises from the ashes, you are in the right place. We are starting a brand new 6-part series today that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Before we dive into the velvet and the violence, please make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment below with your theories on what happens next. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. Now take a deep breath. Let's begin. Part 1. The Velvet Cage. The silence in the VIP suite of the Obsidian Club was heavier than gold. It was a silence bought with blood, maintained by fear, and perfumed with the scent of expensive cognac and old leather. Elian sat at the grand piano in the corner, his fingers hovering over the ivory keys like trembling ghosts. He was beautiful in a way that felt tragic. Pale skin that seemed almost translucent under the dim chandeliers, dark hair falling into eyes that held the fractured look of a hunted animal. He wore a sheer silk shirt that billowed around his slender frame, but it was the accessory around his neck that drew the eye. It was a thick, midnight black velvet choker, wide, suffocating, and stark against his porcelain throat. He adjusted it constantly. His left hand would leave the keys during a rest, fly up to his neck to ensure the fabric was still in place, and then dart back down to the melody. Tap, adjust, play, tap, adjust, play. Don't stop playing. A voice hissed from the shadows near the bar. It was Marcus, the man who held the leash. Marcus was handsome in a jagged, cruel way, wearing a suit that cost more than Elian's entire life was worth. He swirled his drink, his eyes fixed on the double doors at the far end of the room. "He's here," Marcus whispered, the glass trembling slightly in his hand. "Remember what I told you, Elian. If you embarrass me, if you make a single sound, if you let that thing slip, you know what happens." Elian didn't look up. He couldn't. He just nodded, a microscopic movement, and let his fingers bleed into a melancholic Chopin nocturne. His throat burned. The skin beneath the velvet was raw, a secret map of pain that throbbed in time with his heartbeat. The double doors swung open. The air in the room didn't just change, it evaporated. 3 men walked in, but really only one mattered. He walked in the center, flanked by 2 guards who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. The man in the middle was a monolith. He was taller than anyone else in the room, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him like armor. This was Dante the Wolf Valerius, the capo of the city, the man who owned the police, the politicians, and tonight, quite possibly, their souls. Dante didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at the guards. He walked straight to the single armchair positioned in the center of the rug, sat down, and crossed his legs with a lethal grace. His eyes were the color of steel, cold and assessing. "Marcus," Dante said. His voice was a low rumble, a sound that vibrated in the floorboards, resonating through the piano bench and straight into Elian's spine. "You said you had a proposition to settle your debt." Marcus stepped forward, his oily charm sliding into place. "Don Dante, thank you for coming. Yes, the shipment from the docks." "I don't care about the shipment," Dante interrupted. He didn't raise his voice, but the threat was unmistakable. He took a gold cigarette case from his pocket, lighting one with a slow, deliberate motion. "You lost 3 million of my money at the tables, Marcus. You have until midnight to convince me not to carve it out of your assets." Elian's breath hitched. He missed a note. It was a tiny mistake, a flat sharp where a natural should be, but in the terrified silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. Marcus froze. He shot a glare at the piano so venomous it could have killed. Dante turned his head slowly. For the first time, the wolf looked at the corner. Elian felt the gaze like a physical touch. It was heavy, hot, and invasive. He shrank inward, hunching his shoulders, his hand flying up instinctively to clutch the velvet choker. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the shout, for the blow, for Marcus to drag him out. "Who is that?" Dante asked. Marcus laughed nervously, waving a hand dismissively. "Just the entertainment, Don Dante. A debt payment from a conservatory student who couldn't pay up. He's nobody. Ignore him." "He looks nervous," Dante observed, blowing a stream of smoke toward the ceiling. "He keeps touching his neck." Elian's hand froze on the velvet. He forced it down to his lap, clenching his fingers together until the knuckles turned white. "Don't look at me," he begged silently. "Please, just look away." "He's eccentric," Marcus said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Artists, you know. They're all a bit fragile. Now, about the territory in the South District." Dante didn't look back at Marcus. He kept his eyes on Elian. Play something else, Dante commanded. Elian opened his eyes, staring at the keys. His hands were shaking so badly, he wasn't sure he could function. Did you hear him? Marcus hissed, stepping closer to the piano, his body blocking Dante's view for a second. He leaned down, his voice a whisper of pure malice. Play the Rachmaninoff. And fix your face. You look like a frightened child. Elian nodded frantically. He took a breath, trying to steady the tremors, and launched into the prelude. It was a storm of notes, heavy and complex. He poured his terror into the music, letting the chaotic chords mask the sound of his own ragged breathing. The meeting continued. Marcus droned on about percentages and logistics. Dante said very little. He sat like a king on a throne, smoking, drinking the whiskey poured for him, but every time Elian looked up through his lashes, he found the wolf watching him. It wasn't a look of lust. It was something far more dangerous. It was curiosity. 20 minutes passed. The heat in the room was rising. The velvet choker felt tighter and tighter, like a noose constricting his windpipe. Sweat trickled down Elian's back. The wound beneath the fabric, fresh from this morning, when Marcus had used the buckle of his belt, began to sting sharply as the salt from his sweat touched it. Elian gasped softly, his hand flying to his neck again. He tugged at the bottom edge of the choker, just trying to get a millimeter of air, a second of relief. Stop fidgeting. Marcus snapped, losing his temper. The negotiation wasn't going well, and he needed a target for his frustration. Marcus strode over to the piano. He grabbed Elian's wrist, the one holding the choker, and yanked it down. The violence of the movement knocked Elian off balance. He stumbled on the bench, his other hand slamming onto the keys with a discordant crash. I told you to behave, Marcus snarled, raising his hand. Touch him, Dante's voice cut through the air, and you lose the hand. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's hand hovered in the air, inches from Elian's face. He turned slowly to look at Dante. The Don hadn't moved. He was still sitting comfortably, but the air around him had darkened. The predator had woken up. Excuse me, Marcus stammered. I said. Dante stood up. He rose slowly, unfolding his massive height until he loomed over the room. He walked toward the piano, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. If you strike him, I will cut your hand off at the wrist. Marcus lowered his arm, stepping back, confusion warring with fear on his face. Dante, he's mine. He's just a pet. I'm disciplining him. Dante ignored him. He walked right up to Elian. Up close, the alpha was overwhelming. He smelled of tobacco, sandalwood, and gunpowder. He was so large he blocked out the light from the rest of the room. Elian stopped breathing. He stared at the buttons of Dante's vest, unable to meet his eyes. Dante placed a hand on the piano lid, leaning down. What is your name? Elian, he whispered, the name breaking in the middle. Elian. Dante tested the name, rolling it around his mouth like fine wine. Why are you terrified, Elian? I'm not, Elian lied, his voice trembling. I'm just focused. Dante's eyes dropped to the velvet choker. You've touched that ribbon 42 times in the last 20 minutes. I counted. Elian's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It's just a habit. Comfort. Comfort. Dante reached out. Elian flinched so violently he almost fell off the bench. He scrambled backward, pressing his spine against the hard wood of the piano casing, his hands flying up to cover his neck protectively. No, please don't. Dante paused, his hands suspended in the air. He looked at Elian's reaction, the sheer, unadulterated panic in his eyes. He looked at Marcus, who was standing pale and sweating in the background. Then he looked back at the velvet. Dante's eyes narrowed. The steel gaze turned into ice. Marcus, Dante said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Come here. Marcus shuffled forward, looking like a man walking to the gallows. Yes, Don Dante? This choker, Dante said, gesturing to Elian's neck. Take it off. Elian let out a whimper. No, please. Sir, please. I can't. He said I can't. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over his pale cheeks. Please don't make me. Why? Dante asked Elian softly. What is under there? Nothing. Elian sobbed. It's nothing, it's just. I'm ugly. It's ugly. Please. Dante looked at Marcus. Take it off. Now. It's really not necessary, Marcus started. Dante pulled a gun from his jacket. It was a sleek, matte black pistol. He didn't point it at Marcus's head. He pointed it at Marcus's knee. Bang. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Marcus screamed, collapsing to the floor, clutching his shattered kneecap. Blood began to pool on the expensive rug. Elian screamed too, curling into a ball on the piano bench, covering his ears. Dante didn't blink. He holstered the weapon and turned back to Elian. He moved closer, crowding Elian against the piano. But when he reached out this time, his movements were slow, broadcasted, giving Elian time to pull away. Elian didn't pull away. He was paralyzed by shock. "He can't hurt you anymore," Dante murmured. His voice was surprisingly gentle, a deep rumble that seemed to promise safety. "Let me see." Dante's large, rough fingers brushed against Elian's jaw. Elian trembled, tears streaming down his face, but he didn't fight. He couldn't. He was broken, and this man had just shot his owner. Dante's fingers found the clasp of the velvet choker at the back of Elian's neck. Click. The fabric loosened. Elian squeezed his eyes shut, holding his breath, waiting for the disgust, waiting for the rejection. Dante peeled the heavy velvet away. It fell to the floor with a soft thud. The silence returned. But this time, it was horrified. Dante stared at Elian's neck. It wasn't just a bruise. It was a massacre. Around the slender, pale column of his throat was a ring of burns. Cigarette burns. Some old and scarred over, silvery and white. Some fresh and weeping, red and angry. They formed a perfect collar of pain, a permanent branding that marked him as property. But right in the center, over his voice box, was something worse. A carving. A single letter cut into the skin with a knife, recently reopened. M. For Marcus. Dante stared at the mark. The rage that filled him was so sudden, so violent, that his vision actually blurred at the edges. He had seen torture. He had dealt death. But this was the desecration of something pure. He looked at Elian's face. The boy was shaking apart, his eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the verdict. Dante reached out. He didn't recoil. He didn't look away. He cupped Elian's face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears. "Open your eyes," Dante commanded. It wasn't a request. Elian slowly opened his wet lashes. He looked into the steel-gray eyes of the wolf and saw something he had never seen before. He didn't see disgust. He saw murder. But the murder wasn't directed at him. "You belong to him?" Dante asked, his voice thick with suppressed fury. "Why, yes," Elian whispered. "No," Dante said. He leaned in, his forehead resting against Elian's. "Not anymore. Pack your things, Pianist. You're leaving." "Leaving?" Elian gasped. "Where?" Dante pulled back, looking at the bleeding, shivering boy in front of him. He looked at the burns that marred the perfect skin. And in that moment, the most dangerous crime lord in the city made a decision that would start a war. "Home," Dante said. "You're coming home with me. And if anyone tries to stop us." Dante turned his head to look at his guards, then down at the whimpering mess of Marcus on the floor. "Burn the building down," Dante ordered. "Leave no one alive." As the guards drew their weapons and the alarms began to blare, Elian felt a heavy coat being draped over his shoulders. It smelled of smoke and safety. For the first time in 3 years, the velvet was gone. But as Dante lifted him effortlessly into his arms, carrying him out of the room like a bride, Elian realized with a terrifying jolt. He had just traded a devil for a god. And gods were much, much harder to survive. End of Part 1. Part 2, The Wolf's Den. The drive to the penthouse was a blur of neon lights and suffocating silence. Elian sat pressed against the cold leather of the passenger door, his knees pulled up to his chest. He was still wearing his stage clothes, the sheer silk shirt now torn at the collar, stained with a few drops of blood from where the velvet had rubbed his skin raw. Dante's heavy coat was draped over him like a lead blanket, smelling of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of gunpowder. Dante drove with one hand on the wheel. He hadn't spoken since they left the club. He hadn't looked at Elian. His jaw was set in a line of granite, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked road ahead. Elian's mind was racing, a chaotic symphony of terror. Why did he take me? What does he want? Marcus used me for money, for status. What does a man like Dante Valerius want? He stole a glance at the Alpha. Dante was terrifyingly beautiful in the passing streetlights, but it was the beauty of a natural disaster. A storm you couldn't outrun. "Stop shaking," Dante said. His voice broke the silence like a hammer on glass. It wasn't a shout, it was a low, flat command. "I can't," Elian stammered, his teeth chattering. "I'm sorry. I'm trying." Dante sighed, a rough sound that rumbled in his chest. He reached over to the dashboard and cranked up the heat. "I'm not going to hurt you, Elian. You need to get that through your head before we arrive." "Everyone says that," Elian whispered, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Dante's hand tightened on the steering wheel. The leather creaked. "I am not everyone, and I am certainly not Marcus." At the mention of the name, Elian flinched. He instinctively reached for his neck, his fingers searching for the velvet choker that wasn't there. His hand met only raw, stinging skin. He pulled his hand back as if burned, tears pricking his eyes again. He felt naked, exposed. The scars felt like they were glowing in the dark, broadcasting his shame to the world. The car slowed, turning into the underground garage of a massive glass spire that pierced the city skyline. This was the Valerius Tower, a fortress. Dante parked the car in a private bay. He killed the engine and turned to Elian. "Can you walk?" Dante asked. "Or do I need to carry you again?" "I can walk," Elian said quickly. He didn't want to be touched. Every touch was a transaction he couldn't afford. He opened the door, his legs wobbling as his feet hit the concrete. He clutched Dante's coat tighter around himself, trying to hide his body. Dante watched him for a second, his gray eyes analyzing every tremor, before turning and walking toward the elevator. "Follow me." The ride up was dizzying. The elevator had no buttons. It moved on a biometric scan of Dante's palm. As they ascended, Elian's ears popped. They were going to the top. The wolf's den. When the doors slid open, Elian gasped. The penthouse was cavernous. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire glittering city, dark marble floors, and furniture that looked like art. But it was cold. It felt empty. It lacked the warmth of a home. It felt like the cage of a very lonely, very dangerous animal. "Lev," Dante called out into the empty air. A man appeared from a side door. He was older, with a scar running down his cheek and a military bearing. He didn't look surprised to see a shivering, half-dressed boy in the middle of the living room. "Sir, lock down the perimeter," Dante ordered, taking off his suit jacket and tossing it onto a chair. "No one in or out. If Marcus's men come within 3 blocks, eliminate them." "Understood," Lev said. His eyes flicked to Elian. There was no judgment, only a clinical assessment. "Does the guest require medical attention?" "Get the kit," Dante said, "and a bottle of the 96 whiskey." Lev nodded and vanished. "Sit." Dante pointed to a massive charcoal sofa in the center of the room. Elian hesitated. The sofa looked pristine. He felt dirty, covered in sweat and the grime of the club. I don't want to ruin it." Dante turned slowly. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading into a simmering irritation. "Elian, it is a couch. Sit down." Elian scrambled to obey, perching on the very edge of the cushion, ready to bolt at a moment's notice. Dante walked to the wet bar, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He downed one in a single swallow, his throat working. He picked up the second glass and walked over to Elian, holding it out. "Drink." Elian took the glass with trembling hands. I don't drink. It messes with my hands." "For the piano." Dante stared at him. For a moment, the hardness in his face softened. "You aren't playing tonight, Pianist. Drink it. It will help with the shock." Elian took a small sip. The liquid burned pleasantly on its way down, settling the nausea in his stomach. Lev returned, placing a black medical box on the coffee table before disappearing again. Dante sat on the coffee table, directly in front of Elian. He was close. Too close. His knees brushed against Elian's. Dante opened the kit. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. "Take off the coat," Dante said softly. Elian froze. He gripped the lapels of the coat. "Please." "Elian." Dante's voice was patient but firm. "I need to clean the wounds. If they get infected, you will lose your voice. Or worse." Slowly, agonizingly, Elian let the heavy coat slide off his shoulders. He sat there in the torn silk shirt, the collar hanging open to reveal the devastation on his neck. Dante leaned in. He turned on a small lamp on the table, illuminating the skin. Up close, the damage was worse than Dante had thought. The M carving was jagged, the edges inflamed. The cigarette burns were in various stages of healing, creating a constellation of cruelty. Dante reached out with an antiseptic wipe. "This is going to sting." He touched the wipe to the carving. Elian hissed, his back arching, his hands gripping the sofa cushions until his knuckles turned white. A whimper escaped his throat. "I know," Dante murmured. "I know. Breathe." Dante worked with surprising dexterity for a man built for violence. His large hands were steady, cleaning the blood and the dirt from the raw skin. He applied a cooling gel that smelled of aloe, then began to wrap a clean, soft gauze around Elian's neck. "Why didn't you run?" Dante asked quietly, his eyes focused on the bandage he was securing. Elian looked at Dante's lowered lashes. "Run to where?" "Marcus had the police on his payroll. He had my passport. He said if I left, he would break my fingers. Dante's hands paused. He looked up, his eyes locking with Elian's. He threatened your hands. It's the only thing I have, Elian whispered. I'm nothing without the piano. It's the only time I feel real. Dante finished the bandage. It was snug but not tight. It felt nothing like the velvet. It felt like protection. You are not nothing, Dante said fiercely. He reached out and tucked a strand of sweat-dampened hair behind Elian's ear. The touch was electric. And no one will ever threaten your hands again. If anyone tries, I will remove theirs. Elian searched Dante's face for the lie. He looked for the cruelty, the hidden agenda. But all he saw was a terrifying intensity. What do you want? Elian asked, his voice barely audible. Dante sat back, wiping his hands on a towel. Excuse me. The debt, Elian said, looking down at his lap. Marcus owed you 3 million. You took me. That means I'm the payment. He took a shaky breath, his face burning with shame. I know how this works. I know what men like you want. Just, please, can we get it over with? I'm tired. The silence that followed was suffocating. Dante stood up slowly. He walked to the window, looking out at the city. His back was rigid, his shoulders tense. Is that what you think I am? Dante asked, his voice low and dangerous. You think I brought you here to use you like he did? I don't know what else I'm good for, Elian admitted brokenly. Dante turned around. His face was thunderous. He walked back to Elian, leaning down, grabbing the arm of the sofa on either side of Elian's head, caging him in. Elian squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the anger. Open your eyes, Dante commanded. Elian opened them. Listen to me very carefully, Dante snarled softly. You are not a currency. You are not a debt payment. You are a human being who has been treated like an animal for too long. Dante leaned closer, his nose almost touching Elian's. I took you because the thought of leaving you in that room for one more second made me want to burn the entire city to the ground. There is no transaction here, Elian. You owe me nothing. Elian stared at him, his mouth slightly open. He couldn't process the words. Then why? Why save me? Dante's gaze dropped to Elian's mouth, then back up to his eyes. A flicker of something dark and hungry passed through the wolf's eyes, but he shoved it down. Because, Dante straightened up, pulling away. I hate wasted talent. Dante grabbed the coat and tossed it back over Elian's lap. Lev prepared a room for you. Down the hall, second door on the right. There are clothes in the closet. A shower. A lock on the door. He turned to walk away. A lock? Elian asked, confused. Dante paused. Yes, you can lock it from the inside. I have a master key, obviously, but I give you my word. I will never enter that room without your permission. It is your sanctuary. Elian stood up, his legs feeling like jelly. Thank you, he whispered. Dante didn't look back. Go to sleep, Elian. Tomorrow, we have to deal with the fallout. Elian walked down the long, dark hallway. He found the room. It was beautiful, decorated in shades of cream and gray. There was a massive bed that looked like a cloud. He walked into the bathroom, stripping off the ruined clothes, and stood under the scalding water for a long time, scrubbing his skin until it was red, trying to wash away the memory of Marcus's hands. When he finally stepped out, he found a set of silk pajamas on the bed. They were too big for him, clearly Dante's. He put them on, rolling up the sleeves. They smelled like him. Sandalwood and smoke. Elian climbed into the massive bed. He stared at the door. He got up, walked over, and clicked the lock. It was a small sound click, but it echoed in the silence. He lay in the dark, touching the gauze on his neck. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't wearing the velvet. He wasn't choking. But as sleep began to drag him under, a new fear took root in his chest. Marcus was a monster he knew. He knew the rules of that hell. Dante Valerius was a mystery. He was powerful, unpredictable, and strangely gentle. And that terrified Elian more than anything. Because if he let himself trust the wolf, and the wolf turned out to be just another monster, this time, Elian knew he wouldn't survive the break. Elian woke with a start. The room was flooded with gray morning light. For a second, he didn't know where he was. He panicked, his heart hammering, until the smell of sandalwood hit him. Dante. He sat up. The house was silent. Elian crept out of bed. He unlocked the door and peeked into the hallway. Empty. He walked barefoot toward the living room, drawn by a sound. Not a voice. A melody. No, not a melody. Silence. But a silence that felt expectant. He turned the corner into the main living area. Dante wasn't there. But something else was. In the far corner of the room, bathed in the morning light, sat a piano. It wasn't just a piano. It was a Steinway Model D. A concert grand. Jet black, polished to a mirror shine, the lid propped open like the wing of a great bird. It was the kind of instrument Elian had only dreamed of touching in the conservatory before his life had been stolen. He walked toward it like a moth to a flame. He forgot his fear. He forgot the scars. He forgot where he was. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the keys. They were pristine ivory. "Go ahead," a voice said from the balcony door. Elian jumped, spinning around. Dante was standing there, leaning against the glass frame. He was wearing casual clothes, black trousers and a fitted gray t-shirt that showed off the tattoos covering his arms. He held a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked less like a crime lord and more like a man at peace in his own domain. I didn't mean to pry," Elian said, backing away from the instrument. "I bought it 5 years ago," Dante said, taking a sip of coffee. His eyes fixed on Elian. "I don't play. It just sits there, gathering dust. A waste of craftsmanship." He gestured with his mug. "Play." Elian looked at his hands. "I haven't warmed up. I look like a mess." "Play, Elian," Dante said softly. It was a challenge. A plea. Elian sat on the bench. It was leather, cool and firm. He took a deep breath. He placed his hands on the keys. He didn't play Chopin this time. He didn't play the angry, fearful Rachmaninoff Marcus had demanded. He played something soft, something broken, a melody he had written in his head during the long nights locked in Marcus's basement. It was a song of mourning, but also of survival. The notes floated through the massive penthouse, filling the cold space with warmth and sorrow. Dante watched him. He watched the way Elian transformed when he played. The hunch in his shoulders disappeared. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a fierce, focused intensity. The boy who stuttered and flinched became a king when he sat at the keys. Dante felt a tightening in his chest. He realized then, with a dangerous clarity, that he hadn't just saved a boy. He had stolen a star, and he would kill anyone who tried to take him back. Elian finished the piece, the last note hanging in the air, vibrating in the silence. He slowly lowered his hands, his head bowed, waiting for the critique, waiting for the order to play something faster, something happier. "Beautiful," Dante whispered. Elian turned his head. Dante hadn't moved. He was staring at Elian with an expression that burned hotter than any fire. "You are staying here," Dante said. It wasn't a question. "You will play that piano every day. You will eat. You will heal. And you will never wear velvet again." Elian looked at the wolf. For the first time, a tiny, fragile seed of hope began to bloom in the graveyard of his heart. "Okay," Elian whispered back. But the piece was shattered a second later. The elevator chimed. Dante's expression shifted instantly. The softness vanished, replaced by the steel mask of the capo. He reached behind his back, pulling a gun from his waistband before the doors even opened. "Get behind me," Dante ordered, stepping in front of the piano, shielding Elian with his body. The elevator doors slid open. Lev stood there, his face pale, covered in soot. He looked at Dante, his voice grim. "Sir, it's the warehouse in the East District." "What about it?" Dante asked, his gun not wavering. "It's gone," Lev said. "Marcus's brother. He didn't wait for a negotiation. He just declared war." Dante lowered the gun slowly. A terrifying smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a wolf who had just caught the scent of blood. "Good," Dante said. "I was hoping for an excuse." He turned to Elian, who was trembling behind the piano. "Stay inside, Elian," Dante said, his voice dark with promise. "I have to go and remind the city why they call me the Wolf." End of Part 2. Part 3. The Blood on the Ivory. The penthouse was a fortress, but to Elian, it felt like a glass cage suspended in the eye of a hurricane. 3 days had passed since Dante left. 3 days of silence. 3 days of Lev standing by the elevator like a gargoyle, armed and unmoving. Elian hadn't stepped foot outside. He hadn't even looked at the front door. The world outside that glass was burning. Dante had promised fire, and the news reports playing softly on the television confirmed he had delivered it. Warehouses across the East District were up in smoke. The Valerius family was at war. But inside, the air was still. Elian spent his days at the piano. It was the only way he could breathe. He played for hours, his fingers flying over the keys until they ached, pouring his terror into Debussy and Liszt. When he played, he didn't feel the phantom weight of the velvet choker. When he played, he wasn't a slave with a carved neck. He was a god creating a universe of sound. "You should eat," a gruff voice said. Elian jumped, his hands crashing onto the keys in a discordant jangle. Lev was standing there, holding a tray. A sandwich. A glass of water. I'm not hungry, Mr. Lev, Elian whispered, looking down. Dante will kill me if you starve, Lev said simply, setting the tray on the piano lid. And I don't want to die today. Eat. Elian picked up the sandwich. His hands were shaking less than they had 3 days ago, but the tremors were still there. Is he okay? Lev looked at the boy. He saw the bruises fading on his wrists, the fresh gauze wrapped neatly around his neck. He saw the way Elian looked at the door every 5 minutes, a mix of hope and terror. The wolf is hard to kill, Lev said. He will return when the work is done. What work? Elian asked. Lev didn't answer. He just tapped his holster and walked back to his post. It was midnight when the elevator finally moved. Elian was asleep on the massive charcoal sofa. He had been too afraid to go to the bedroom, too afraid to be behind a closed door if Marcus's men somehow broke in. He wanted to be near the exit. Or maybe he wanted to be near where Dante would enter. The chime of the elevator woke him instantly. Ping. Elian sat up, clutching a throw pillow to his chest. His heart hammered against his ribs. Friend or foe? The doors slid open. Dante Valerius stepped out. He looked like a ruin. His charcoal suit was gone, replaced by a tactical vest and a dark shirt that was torn at the shoulder. There was a cut above his eyebrow, bleeding sluggishly into his eye. His knuckles were raw, split open. He smelled of smoke, copper, and rain. Lev snapped to attention. Sir, it's done, Dante rasped. His voice was wrecked, like he had been screaming or swallowing smoke. The East District is secure. Marcus's brother is retired. Injuries? Lev asked, his eyes scanning Dante. Nothing that matters, Dante grunted. He walked past Lev, swaying slightly. He looked exhausted, his movements heavy, dragging. He walked straight toward the wet bar, bypassing the sofa. He didn't seem to see Elian. He poured a glass of whiskey, his hand shaking slightly as he lifted it to his lips. He downed it, hissed in pain, and poured another. Elian watched him from the shadows of the sofa. He should stay quiet. He should disappear. That's what he did with Marcus. When the master was angry or hurt, you made yourself small. But then Dante groaned, leaning heavily against the counter, his head dropping forward. A drop of blood fell from his forehead onto the pristine black marble. Drip. Elian moved before he thought. He stood up, the pillow falling to the floor. He walked across the room, his bare feet silent on the cold stone. Mr. Dante? Dante spun around, his hand flying to the knife at his belt. Elian froze, raising his hands. It's me. It's just me. Dante blinked, his gray eyes struggling to focus. The violence slowly drained out of his stance, replaced by a crushing weariness. He released the knife handle. Elian, Dante breathed. Why are you awake? You're bleeding, Elian whispered. He took a hesitant step forward. Let me help. Dante laughed, a dark, humorless sound. I'm fine. Go to bed. You're not fine, Elian said, finding a sudden, strange courage. Maybe it was because Dante looked human for the first time. Vulnerable. You helped me. Let me help you. Dante stared at him. The boy was wearing oversized pajamas, his hair messy from sleep, looking like a strong wind could blow him away. Yet he was stepping toward the blood, not away from it. Get the kit, Dante surrendered, sinking onto a bar stool. Elian ran to get the medical box. He returned in seconds, setting it on the counter. He opened it, his fingers deft and practiced. He had patched himself up 1,000 times in Marcus's bathroom. He knew how to clean a wound. Tilt your head back, Elian instructed softly. Dante obeyed. He closed his eyes, letting his head rest against the cabinet behind him. Elian stepped between Dante's spread knees. He didn't touch him yet. He soaked a cotton pad in antiseptic. This will sting, Elian murmured, echoing Dante's words from 3 nights ago. Dante's lips quirked up in a ghost of a smile. Do your worst, pianist. Elian dabbed at the cut on Dante's brow. Dante didn't flinch. He sat like a statue, breathing deeply, inhaling the scent of Elian, soap and something uniquely sweet. Elian worked in silence. He cleaned the blood, applied a butterfly bandage to close the gash. Then he moved to Dante's hands. He took the large, battered hands in his own slim, artistic ones. The contrast was stark. Dante's hands were weapons, scarred and rough. Elian's were instruments, pale and delicate. Elian cleaned the split knuckles with a reverence that made Dante's breath hitch. Why? Dante asked, his eyes still closed. Why what? Elian whispered, wrapping a bandage around Dante's thumb. Why aren't you afraid of me right now? Dante opened his eyes. They were dark, dilated. I just killed 4 men, Elian. I smell like death. And you are standing between my legs cleaning my wounds. Elian paused. He looked down at Dante's hands. Because you didn't hurt me, Elian said simply. Marcus smelled like expensive cologne, and he broke my ribs. You smell like death, but you gave me a piano. Dante stared at him. The urge to touch him, to pull him close, was overwhelming. It was a dangerous urge. Elian was broken glass. If Dante held him too tight, they would both bleed. I didn't do it for charity, Dante said roughly. I told you. I hate wasted talent. I know, Elian said. He finished the bandage and stepped back. All done. Dante looked at his hands, then at Elian. Thank you. You should sleep, Elian said. The sofa is comfortable. I tested it. Dante stood up. He towered over Elian again. The dynamic shifted. The patient was gone. The wolf was back. He reached out and with a single finger hooked the collar of Elian's pajama shirt, pulling it slightly to the side. He wasn't looking at skin. He was looking at the gauze on Elian's neck. Did you change this? Dante asked. Yes, Elian said breathlessly. This morning. Good. Dante let go. Keep it clean. I don't want scars on my investment. It was a cruel thing to say. A wall being put back up. Investment. Elian flinched, the light in his eyes dimming. Right. Investment. He turned to leave, heading for his room. Elian, Dante called out. Elian stopped, but didn't turn. I played the Rachmaninoff recording in the car, Dante said. The one you played for Marcus. Elian wrapped his arms around himself. I messed up the tempo. I was scared. It was angry, Dante said. It was the most honest thing I've ever heard. You have a lot of rage in you, Elian. Don't let the world convince you that you're just a victim. Victims don't play like that. Survivors do. Elian stood there for a moment, the words sinking into his bones. Survivor. Good night, Dante, he whispered. Good night, Elian. The nightmare came at 3 a.m. It was always the same. The velvet. The darkness. Marcus's laugh. The feeling of the fabric tightening, cutting off his air, the panic rising in his throat like bile. Elian woke up screaming. He sat up in bed, clawing at his neck, tearing at the gauze. It's choking me. Get it off. Get it off. The door burst open. Dante was there in seconds. He was shirtless, wearing only sweatpants, a gun in his hand. He scanned the room, saw no intruders, only Elian thrashing on the bed. He dropped the gun on the carpet and vaulted onto the mattress. Elian. Dante grabbed Elian's wrists, pinning them to the bed to stop him from ripping his own skin. Elian, wake up. Look at me. Elian was sobbing, his eyes unseeing, trapped in the memory. Please, Marcus, please, I'll be good. Don't put it on, please. Dante's heart shattered. He growled low in his throat. I am not Marcus. Dante shouted, shaking him slightly. Elian, look at the wolf. The name broke through. The wolf. Elian gasped, his eyes focusing. He saw the gray eyes. He saw the tattoo on Dante's chest, a geometric storm. He felt the heavy weight of the man on top of him. Dante. I'm here, Dante said, his voice dropping to a soothed rumble. He didn't let go of Elian's wrists. You were dreaming. You're safe. You're in the tower. Elian collapsed back onto the pillows, his chest heaving. Tears streamed down his face. I felt it. I felt the velvet. It's gone, Dante promised. I burned it. Remember? I burned it in the ashtray. It's still there, Elian wept. It's in my head. Dante slowly released Elian's wrists. He shifted his weight, sitting on the edge of the bed, pulling Elian up into a sitting position. Without asking, Dante pulled Elian into his chest. It was awkward at first. Elian stiffened. But Dante was warm, so incredibly warm and solid. He felt like a wall that nothing could break through. Slowly, Elian melted. He buried his face in Dante's bare shoulder and cried. Dante held him, one hand on Elian's back, rubbing circles, the other hand resting protectively on the back of Elian's head, his fingers tangled in the soft hair. I will kill him, Dante whispered into the darkness. It was a vow. I broke his brother. I broke his business. And when I find where he is hiding, I will break him. He will never touch you again. Elian pulled back slightly, sniffing. He looked at Dante's chest, at the scars that littered the alpha's skin. Bullet wounds. Knife marks. You have scars too, Elian noted softly. Occupational hazards, Dante said. Elian reached out, his finger hovering over a jagged white line on Dante's ribcage. Do they hurt? Only when it rains, Dante said. He caught Elian's hand. Yours will heal, Elian. The skin heals. The mind takes longer. But you are not doing it alone anymore. Dante reached to the bedside table. He picked up the roll of fresh gauze Lev had left there. Turn around, Dante commanded gently. Elian turned his back to Dante. You tore the bandage in your sleep, Dante said. He carefully peeled away the frayed gauze. Let me fix it. Dante rewrapped the neck. His movements were slow, hypnotic. When he was done, he didn't pull away immediately. His hands lingered on Elian's shoulders. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to the bandage, right over where the M was carved. Elian stopped breathing. The kiss burned through the layers of cotton. It was an act of claiming, an act of worship. Go back to sleep, Dante said, pulling away and standing up. He picked up his gun. I will sit outside the door. You don't have to. I want to, Dante said. He walked to the door, opened it, and sat on the floor in the hallway, his back against the frame. I'm right here. If the nightmares come back, scream. I'll fight them too. Elian lay back down. He watched the shadow of Dante sitting in the hallway light. For the first time in his life, the monster outside the door was there to keep the other monsters away. Morning brought rain. Elian woke up alone, but rested. He found Dante in the kitchen, drinking coffee, looking at a tablet. The violence of the night before was packed away behind the suit and the stoic expression. Lev brought a package, Dante said, not looking up. For you. Elian froze. For me? I don't. Nobody knows I'm here. Dante pointed to a small, black box on the counter. Lev scanned it. No explosives. No toxins. Just a note and an object. Elian walked over to it. His hands trembled. He opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of white silk, was a single perfect red rose. And wrapped around the stem was a ribbon. A black velvet ribbon. Elian couldn't breathe. The room spun. There was a card. Elian picked it up with numb fingers. The handwriting was elegant, spidery. Marcus's handwriting. You look beautiful in his tower, my little bird. But remember, wolves eat their prey. I'll see you soon. M***. Elian dropped the card. Dante was there in an instant. He snatched the card from the floor, read it in 1 second, and his face transformed. The wolf didn't just snarl. He went perfectly, terrifyingly still. He was watching, Elian whispered, backing away until he hit the refrigerator. He knows. He knows I'm here. He's going to come. Dante crushed the card in his fist. He turned to Elian. His eyes were burning with a cold, blue fire. Let him come, Dante said. His voice was so low it vibrated in the floor. Dante walked over to the box. He took the velvet ribbon out. He walked to the gas stove, turned on the burner, and held the ribbon in the flame. They watched it curl and blacken, turning to ash. Lev, Dante roared. Lev appeared from the hallway, weapon already drawn. Prepare the car, Dante ordered. And get the team. We aren't waiting for Marcus to come to us. Dante turned to Elian. He walked over, grabbed Elian's face, and forced him to look up. I told you I would burn the city, Dante said fiercely. I am going to find him, Elian. And I am going to end this. Tonight. Don't go, Elian begged, clutching Dante's shirt. He'll kill you. It's a trap. Dante smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I am the trap, Elian. Dante leaned down and kissed Elian's forehead. A promise. A goodbye. Wait for me, Dante said. He turned and walked out the door, Lev trailing behind him. The elevator doors closed. Elian was left alone in the silence. He looked at the ash of the velvet ribbon in the sink. He looked at the piano. He walked over to the instrument. He sat down. Marcus thought he was a bird. Dante thought he was a survivor. Elian placed his hands on the keys. He slammed down a chord so dark, so heavy, that it shook the windows. He wasn't going to wait. Not this time. End of Part 3. Part 4. The Glass Fortress Shatters. Chapter 10. The Echo of Silence. The elevator doors hissed shut, sealing Elian in the penthouse. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressing against his eardrums like deep water. Dante was gone. The wolf had left the den to hunt, and he had left his most fragile possession behind. Elian stood in the center of the living room, staring at the spot where Dante had stood. The smell of sandalwood and gunpowder lingered in the air, a ghost of the man who had promised to burn the city down for him. I am the trap, Dante had said. Elian shivered. He walked to the window. Below, the city of New York was a grid of rain-slicked asphalt and neon. Somewhere out there, in the labyrinth of the streets, Dante was speeding toward violence. Somewhere out there, Marcus was waiting. Elian turned back to the room. It was vast, cold, and impeccably designed. A fortress of glass and steel. But fortresses were designed to keep enemies out, not to keep nightmares from bleeding in. He walked to the Steinway. The black lacquer gleamed like a dark mirror. He sat down on the leather bench. His hands were trembling, but not from the cold. They were trembling from a surplus of adrenaline that had nowhere to go. He felt useless. He was the damsel in the tower, waiting for the knight to slay the dragon. No, Elian thought, a spark of anger igniting in his chest. I am not a damsel. I survived 3 years of hell. I survived the velvet. He placed his hands on the keys. He didn't play a melody at first. He played a single, low bass note. It reverberated through the floorboards, up his spine. He closed his eyes and began to play. Not Chopin, not Liszt. He played something chaotic, something dissonant. He improvised. He poured the fear of the last 3 days, the phantom sensation of the choker, the heat of Dante's hands, and the terror of the note Marcus had sent into the music. It was a storm. It was the sound of glass breaking. He played for an hour. The music filled the empty penthouse, chasing away the shadows. But the shadows fought back. Around 10 p.m., the lights flickered. Elian's hands froze on the keys. The penthouse was powered by a dedicated grid with backup generators. The lights shouldn't flicker. They flickered again. Then, with a groan of dying machinery, they went out. The music died. Total darkness engulfed the room, save for the ambient gray glow of the city filtering through the rain-streaked windows. The silence rushed back in, louder than before. Elian stood up slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Lev," he whispered. No answer. Lev had gone with Dante. There were guards in the lobby, 40 floors down. There were security protocols. Dante had said the perimeter was locked. Click. The sound came from the elevator. It wasn't the cheerful chime of arrival. It was the mechanical clunk of an override, the sound of gears being forced. Elian backed away from the piano. He moved toward the kitchen island, his eyes fixed on the steel doors of the private lift. The digital display above the elevator was dead. No numbers, just a dark void. But the doors were opening. Slowly, too slowly, like jaws being pried apart. Elian reached behind him, his hand fumbling over the marble counter until his fingers closed around the handle of a heavy chef's knife from the block. He gripped it with both hands, the steel cold against his sweating palms. The doors opened fully. The elevator car was dark. "Dante!" Elian called out, his voice cracking. "Is that you?" A figure stepped out of the shadows of the shaft. It wasn't the broad, hulking silhouette of the wolf. This figure was leaner, elegant, wearing a long trench coat that was wet with rain. A lighter flickered to life. The small flame illuminated a face that haunted Elian's every nightmare. Sharp cheekbones, thin lips curled into a cruel, knowing smile, eyes that looked like dead sharks. "Hello, little bird," Marcus whispered. Chapter 11, The Intruder. Elian stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to that flame, to that face. "How?" Elian gasped. "Dante, he went to find you." "The warehouse." Marcus stepped into the room, shaking the rain from his coat. He snapped the lighter shut, plunging them back into the semi-darkness, but Elian could still see him. He could smell him, that cloying, expensive cologne mixed with the damp smell of the streets. "Dante Valerius is a predictable beast," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the large room. He walked casually toward the liquor cabinet, as if he owned the place. "He thinks with his fists. I burned a warehouse, I sent a note, and off he went running to the East District with his entire pack." Marcus poured himself a drink. He didn't even look at Elian. "He left the back door open," Marcus continued, taking a sip. "Technology is a wonderful thing, Elian. Biometric scanners are hard to fool, unless you bought the security codes from the installer 6 months ago. Just in case." Marcus turned slowly. He looked at Elian, cowering by the kitchen island with the knife. He laughed. A soft, chilling sound. "Put that down, darling. You'll hurt yourself." "Stay back," Elian warned. He raised the knife. His hands were shaking so badly the tip of the blade vibrated in the air. "Dante will come back. He'll kill you." "He might," Marcus conceded, taking a step forward. "But by the time he realizes the warehouse was empty, and by the time he fights through the traffic back to the tower, we will be long gone." "I'm not going with you," Elian said. "Oh, you are," Marcus said. His tone shifted. The amusement vanished, replaced by a cold, hard authority. "You are my property, Elian. You don't get to run away just because a bigger dog showed you a little kindness." Marcus reached into his pocket. Elian flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, Marcus pulled out a length of fabric. It was blue velvet this time. Midnight blue. Thick. Heavy. "I brought you a new one," Marcus whispered. "The black one was ruined. This one matches your eyes." Elian stared at the ribbon. A wave of nausea crashed over him. His throat constricted, the phantom sensation of choking returning with violent force. "No," Elian whimpered. "Come here," Marcus commanded. He He held the ribbon out like a leash. Put it on, and I won't punish you for running away. I'll be lenient. We can go back to the club, you can play your piano, and we can forget this little rebellion. I said no. Elian shouted. He didn't retreat. He didn't cower. Marcus looked surprised. Then annoyed. Have it your way. Marcus lunged. He moved faster than Elian expected. He wasn't a fighter like Dante, but he was vicious. He crossed the distance in 2 strides. Elian slashed with the knife. It was a clumsy strike, born of panic. Marcus caught Elian's wrist midair. His grip was like a vice. He twisted. Crack. Elian screamed as pain shot up his arm. The knife clattered to the floor, sliding across the marble. Marcus slammed Elian back against the refrigerator. The impact knocked the wind out of him. Marcus pressed his forearm against Elian's throat, right over the fresh gauze Dante had applied the night before. You ungrateful little brat, Marcus hissed, his face inches from Elian's. Spittle flew from his lips. I fed you. I clothed you. I gave you a stage. And you spread your legs for the first thug who looks at you. He's not a thug, Elian choked out, clawing at Marcus's arm. He's a king. Marcus's eyes widened in fury. He's a corpse, Marcus snarled. And you are coming with me. He grabbed Elian by the hair, dragging him away from the fridge. Elian kicked and thrashed, his heels skidding on the floor. He bit Marcus's hand. Ah! Marcus shouted, releasing his grip on Elian's hair and backhanding him. The blow sent Elian sprawling to the floor. His head hit the marble with a sickening thud. The world spun. Black spots danced in his vision. He tasted blood, copper, and salt. Marcus stood over him, panting, adjusting his cuffs. He looked down at the velvet ribbon in his hand. Get up, Marcus ordered. Elian tried to push himself up, but his arms felt like lead. He looked toward the elevator. It was dark. Empty. Dante isn't coming, a voice in his head whispered. You're alone. Marcus knelt down. He looped the velvet ribbon around his hands, pulling it taut. Snap. Snap. If you won't walk, Marcus whispered, I'll drag you. He reached for Elian's neck. Chapter 12. The Wolf Returns. Crash. The sound didn't come from the elevator. It came from the window. The floor-to-ceiling glass pane overlooking the terrace exploded inward. A shower of safety glass rained down on the living room like diamonds. Marcus spun around, shielding his face. Through the broken window, amidst the wind and the rain, a shadow leaped into the room. It wasn't an elevator ride. It was a rappel line. Dante Valerius landed on the marble floor in a crouch. He was soaking wet. His tactical vest was streaked with mud. He held a combat knife in one hand and a suppressed pistol in the other. He looked up. If Dante had looked dangerous before, now he looked like the apocalypse. His eyes were entirely black, the pupils blown wide with adrenaline and rage. He saw Marcus. He saw Elian on the floor, bleeding from the mouth. He saw the velvet ribbon in Marcus's hands. A sound tore from Dante's throat. It wasn't a word. It was a roar. A primal, animalistic sound of pure fury. Dante! Elian screamed. Marcus didn't hesitate. He wasn't stupid enough to fight the wolf. He grabbed Elian, hauling him up by the back of his shirt, using him as a human shield. He pressed something cold against Elian's temple. A small, silver Derringer pistol he had hidden in his sleeve. One step. Marcus shrieked, his voice cracking. One step, and I blow his brains out. Dante froze. He stood amidst the shattered glass, wind whipping his wet hair around his face. He leveled his gun at Marcus, but he didn't fire. The angle was too bad. Marcus was cowering behind Elian's slender frame. Drop the gun, Marcus yelled. Kick it over. Now. Dante's chest heaved. He looked at Elian. Elian's eyes were wide, terrified. Blood trickled from his lip. But he wasn't looking at the gun. He was looking at Dante. Don't, Elian whispered. Shut up. Marcus jammed the gun harder into Elian's temple. Dante. I said drop it. Slowly, Dante lowered his pistol. He crouched and placed it on the floor. He kicked it away. It slid across the room. There, Dante said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. No gun. Just us, Marcus. Let him go. You think I'm an idiot? Marcus laughed hysterically. I'm walking out of here with him. We're taking the elevator. You're going to stay right there. Marcus began to back toward the elevator, dragging Elian with him. Elian, Dante said softly. He ignored Marcus entirely. Look at me. Elian locked eyes with the wolf. Do you trust me? Dante asked. Yes, Elian breathed. Then drop, Dante commanded. It was a gamble. A split-second communication born of the nights spent holding each other through nightmares. Elian didn't think. He went dead weight. He collapsed his knees, dropping straight down toward the floor. Marcus, expecting resistance, stumbled. His grip on Elian slipped. For a fraction of a second, his head was exposed above Elian's. Dante didn't reach for the gun. He moved. He covered the 20 feet between them in a blur of motion. Marcus fired the derringer. Bang! The bullet went wild, shattering a vase on the mantel. Before Marcus could cock the hammer for a second shot, Dante was on him. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Dante tackled Marcus, slamming him into the wall of the elevator shaft. The impact cracked the plaster. The derringer flew from Marcus's hand. Elian scrambled away, crawling on his hands and knees, gasping for air. Dante didn't stop. He punched Marcus. Once. Twice. The sound of breaking bone echoed in the room. Marcus crumpled to the floor, blood pouring from his nose. Dante grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his trench coat and hauled him up. You touched him, Dante snarled. He slammed Marcus against the wall again. You came into my house. You touched my pianist. Marcus groaned, his eyes rolling back in his head. He's mine. He is no one's. Dante roared. He threw Marcus to the floor. Marcus tried to crawl away, coughing blood. Dante reached down and picked up the object Marcus had dropped. The blue velvet ribbon. Dante looked at it. Then he looked at Marcus. You like necklaces, Marcus? Dante asked softly. He walked over to the fallen man. He grabbed Marcus by the hair, pulling his head back. No, Marcus gurgled. Dante, wait. Dante wrapped the velvet ribbon around Marcus's neck. He pulled it tight. Dante! Elian shouted. Dante paused. His muscles were locked, his veins bulging. He was seconds away from strangling the life out of the man beneath him. He wanted to. God, he wanted to squeeze until the light went out. Dante, stop. Elian cried, struggling to his feet. Dante turned his head. He looked at Elian. Elian was standing there, holding his side. He looked broken and battered, but his eyes were clear. Don't kill him, Elian said. Dante's brow furrowed. Why? He deserves it. He deserves worse. I know, Elian said. He walked closer, stepping over the broken glass. He put a hand on Dante's shoulder. The contact made Dante flinch. But if you kill him like this, in our home, with that ribbon, you're just like him. Elian looked down at Marcus, who was gasping for air, face purple. He's not worth your soul, Dante, Elian whispered. And I don't want his ghost haunting this tower. I want him gone. Truly gone. Dante stared at Elian. He saw the strength in the boy's face. The steel that had been forged in the fire of trauma. Slowly, Dante loosened his grip on the velvet. He stood up, dragging Marcus with him. Lev. Dante barked into his earpiece. Sir, we just breached the lobby. Elevators are back online. Coming up. Meet me on the ground floor, Dante said. I have trash to take out. Dante looked at Marcus, who was barely conscious. You are going to prison, Marcus, Dante said coldly. Not a comfortable white-collar resort. I own the judges. I own the wardens. You are going to the darkest, deepest hole in the state penitentiary. And every day, for the rest of your miserable life, you will remember that you could have walked away. The elevator doors pinged. They opened. Lev and 3 guards rushed in, guns raised. Take him, Dante said, shoving Marcus toward them. Get him out of my sight. If he speaks, gag him. Lev nodded. And the security breach? Fix it, Dante said. Or you're fired. Lev dragged Marcus into the elevator. The doors closed. The silence returned. Chapter 13, The Aftermath. Dante stood in the center of the ruined living room. He was shaking. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard. He dropped the velvet ribbon. It landed in a puddle of rainwater and blood. He turned to Elian. I left you, Dante whispered. His voice was full of horror. I promised I would protect you, and I left you alone. Elian didn't speak. He walked toward Dante. I'm sorry, Dante choked out. He looked at the bruise forming on Elian's cheek. I failed. No, Elian said. He reached up and cupped Dante's face. Dante was soaked, shivering, covered in mud and blood. You came back, Elian said. You jumped through a window from the roof. You didn't fail, Dante. Dante closed his eyes, leaning into Elian's touch. I should have known. It was a decoy. It's over, Elian said firmly. He's gone. He's really gone this time. Dante opened his eyes. He looked at Elian with a desperation that was painful to witness. Are you hurt? Did he do anything else? Just a bruise, Elian lied. His ribs ached, but he didn't care. Dante scanned Elian's body. He saw the red mark on his cheek. He saw the way Elian was favoring his left side. I'm going to burn the world for this, Dante murmured. No more burning, Elian said softly. Please. I'm tired of fire. Elian took Dante's hand. The hand that had almost killed a man 5 minutes ago. Come, Elian said. You're freezing. He led Dante toward the bathroom. The roles were reversed again. The protector was the one in shock. The survivor was the one taking charge. In the bathroom, Elian turned on the shower. Steam began to fill the room. Take off the vest, Elian said. Dante stood there like a statue. Elian sighed and stepped closer. He undid the Velcro straps of the tactical vest. He pulled it off, dropping it on the floor. It was heavy with plates. Beneath it, Dante's shirt was torn. There was a graze on his side, a bullet wound from the warehouse ambush he hadn't mentioned. You're shot, Elian gasped. It's a scratch, Dante dismissed. Elian peeled the wet shirt off. Dante's body was a map of violence, but tonight he looked vulnerable. Get in, Elian said. Dante stepped into the shower, still wearing his pants. He leaned his forehead against the tile, letting the hot water beat down on his back. The water turned pink as it washed away the blood and mud. Elian hesitated. Then he stepped in too, fully clothed in his pajamas. He wrapped his arms around Dante's waist from behind. He pressed his cheek against Dante's wet, scarred back. Dante stiffened, then melted. He turned around, pulling Elian into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in Elian's neck, right over the gauze. I thought I lost you, Dante whispered into his skin. When I saw the elevator moving, when I saw him holding you. I'm here, Elian soothed, running his hands through Dante's wet hair. I'm right here. They stood there for a long time, holding each other under the spray of the water. The water soaked Elian's pajamas, making them heavy, but he didn't let go. For the first time, Elian realized that the wolf wasn't just a protector. He was a man who was terrified of being alone. A man who had found his mate and almost lost him. Dante pulled back slightly. He looked at Elian, water dripping from his eyelashes. I love you, Dante said. The words hung in the steam-filled air. Elian's heart stopped. He stared at Dante. I didn't mean to say that, Dante admitted, looking panicked. It's too soon. You're traumatized. I'm a monster. Dante, Elian interrupted. He reached up and silenced the wolf with a kiss. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was fierce, desperate. It tasted of rain and survival. Elian pulled back, breathless. I love you too, Elian whispered. My monster. Dante stared at him, as if he couldn't believe his luck. As if Elian was a hallucination. We have to fix the window, Dante said stupidly, his mind clearly unable to process the emotion. Elian laughed. It was a wet, shaky sound, but it was real. Yes, Elian said. We have to fix the window. And the vase. And I think there's blood on the rug. Dante closed his eyes and rested his forehead against Elian's again. I'll buy you a new rug, Dante promised. I'll buy you 1,000 rugs. Just don't leave. I'm not going anywhere, Elian said. And he meant it. The cage was broken. The velvet was gone. The wolf had come home. But as they stood there, safe in the steam, Elian knew that the war wasn't over. Marcus was in prison, yes. But the vacuum of power Marcus left behind would draw new enemies. And the Valerius family had just shown a weakness. Me, Elian thought. I am the weakness. He tightened his arms around Dante. Then I have to become strong, Elian decided. I can't just be the pianist anymore. If I am going to love a wolf, I have to learn how to bite. End of Part 4. Part 5, The Symphony of Scars. Chapter 14, The Gilded Cage. The penthouse was silent, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the frantic energy of reconstruction. Contractors moved like ghosts through the living room, replacing the shattered floor-to-ceiling window. Dante stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching them with the intensity of a hawk circling prey. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. Not since Marcus had been dragged away. Elian sat at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of tea. His neck was still wrapped in clean white gauze, but the bruises on his face were blooming into spectacular shades of violet and yellow. They're moving too slow, Dante growled, turning to Leviticus. I want that glass bulletproof this time. Triple pane. It is, sir, Lev replied patiently. Standard military grade. Dante paced. He was a caged animal. The attack had shaken him to his core. He had built a fortress to keep Elian safe, and it had been breached by a man in a trench coat with a lighter. Elian watched him. He saw the guilt eating Dante alive. Dante, Elian called out softly. Dante stopped pacing instantly. He walked over to Elian, his face softening. He reached out to touch Elian's cheek, then pulled back, afraid to hurt the bruise. Do you need something? Dante asked. Painkillers? More tea. I need you to sit down, Elian said. You're making the workers nervous. Dante sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't care about their nerves. I care about the perimeter. The perimeter is fine, Elian said. He reached out and took Dante's hand. It was rough, warm, and trembling slightly with exhausted adrenaline. Sit. Dante sat on the stool next to him. He slumped forward, resting his forehead on Elian's shoulder. It was a gesture of surrender that he would never show the world, only to this boy. I have to go out tonight, Dante mumbled into Elian's sweater. Elian stiffened. Where? The council, Dante said, lifting his head. His eyes were hard again. Marcus leaving a power vacuum. It's caused ripples. The other families, the Rossis, the Chengs, they smell blood in the water. They think because my home was breached, I am weak. They think I'm distracted. By me, Elian finished. Dante's jaw tightened. They think I have a weakness. I need to go to the summit and remind them that I am not a man they want to test. I'm going with you, Elian said. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Even the workers seemed to pause. Dante stared at him. Absolutely not. I am not staying here, Elian said, his voice rising. Last time you left me here for my safety, Marcus broke in. I am safer with you than I am behind triple-paned glass. It's a summit, Elian, Dante argued, his voice low and dangerous. It's a room full of sharks in expensive suits. They will look at you. They will judge you. They know who you were. Who I was. Elian stood up. The tea sloshed in his cup. I was a victim, Dante. Is that what you're ashamed of? Dante stood up too, towering over him. I am ashamed of nothing. I am trying to protect you from their tongues. They are vicious. They will see the scars and they will whisper. Let them whisper, Elian said. He set the cup down with a sharp clink. He walked around the island and stood toe-to-toe with the wolf. You told me to be a survivor, Elian said. Survivors don't hide in towers while their partners go to war. If I am your weakness, Dante, then show them I am also your strength. If you hide me, you prove them right. You prove that I am just a broken thing you're ashamed to be seen with. Dante looked down at him. He saw the fire in Elian's eyes. It was the same fire that had made him play Rachmaninoff with a gun to his head. You are not broken, Dante whispered fiercely. Then take me with you, Elian challenged. Put me next to you. Let them see. Dante closed his eyes for a moment. He was terrified, not of the other families, but of Elian being hurt again. But he realized Elian was right. Hiding him was what Marcus did. Marcus hid him in the dark. Dante had to bring him into the light. Fine, Dante opened his eyes. But you stay by my side. If you let go of my arm, I burn the building down. Elian smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. Deal. Chapter 15, The Armor of Silk. Preparation for the summit was like preparing for battle. Lev brought in a rack of suits. Black, charcoal, navy. The uniform of the underworld. Elian pushed them aside. No, Elian said. Elian, Dante warned from the doorway, where he was adjusting his cufflinks. This isn't a fashion show. You need to blend in. I spent 3 years blending in, Elian said, flipping through the hangers. I spent 3 years wearing high collars and turtlenecks, so no one would see what Marcus did to me. I'm done hiding. He pulled out a suit from the back. It wasn't black. It was white. Stark, blinding white silk. And the shirt was sheer. Low cut. Dante walked over, his eyes widening. Elian, you can't wear that. Why? Elian asked, holding it up against himself. Because, Dante gestured vaguely to Elian's neck. The bandage. The scars. It shows everything. Elian walked to the mirror. He began to unbutton his pajama top. Dante watched, mesmerized and terrified. Elian peeled off the shirt. He reached up and with steady hands began to unwind the gauze from his neck. The skin beneath was healing, but it was still angry. The ring of cigarette burns was a jagged red necklace. The M carved over his throat was a pink, raised welt. It was ugly. It was brutal. It was the history of his pain written in flesh. Dante stepped up behind him, meeting his eyes in the mirror. You don't have to do this, Dante whispered. We can cover it with makeup. A scarf. No, Elian said. He looked at his reflection. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw a map. Marcus marked me to claim me. If I hide it, I'm still his. If I show it, I own it. Elian put on the white shirt. It buttoned low, leaving his throat and collarbone completely exposed. The scars stood out in stark contrast to the white silk and his pale skin. He put on the jacket. He looked like a fallen angel. Beautiful, tragic, and dangerous. Dante stared at him. He felt a swell of pride so intense it almost brought him to his knees. "You are breathtaking," Dante said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elian flinched instinctively at the velvet texture. "Relax," Dante murmured. "Open it." Elian opened the box. Inside lay a thin chain of platinum. Hanging from it was a small pendant, a wolf, carved from obsidian, howling at the moon. "It's not a collar," Dante said quickly. "It's a protection charm. My mother gave it to me. I want you to wear it." Elian lifted the chain. "Put it on me?" Dante took the necklace. He stepped closer, his large hands moving to Elian's neck. He didn't touch the scars. He fastened the clasp gently. The black wolf rested right above the carved M, a guardian standing over the wound. "Now," Dante said, kissing Elian's forehead, "you look like you belong to the pack." "I am the pack," Elian corrected. Dante grinned. It was a feral, delighted grin. "Yes, you are." Chapter 16, The Summit. The summit was held at the Elysium Hotel, in a ballroom that dripped with crystal and gold. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. The heads of the 5 families sat at round tables, surrounded by their lieutenants. They spoke in hushed tones, eyeing each other with suspicion. When the double doors opened, the room went silent. Dante Valerius walked in. He wore black, a shadow made flesh. And on his arm, in blinding white, walked Elian. The whispers started immediately. "Is that him? The pianist? Look at his neck. Jesus. I heard Marcus broke him." Elian felt the eyes on him like physical touches. He felt the judgment. He felt the pity. His instinct was to shrink, to hunch his shoulders, to hide behind Dante. Survivors don't hide, he reminded himself. He straightened his spine. He lifted his chin, exposing the scars even more. He looked the nearest capo, Don Rossi, dead in the eye. Rossi blinked, surprised by the boy's audacity. Dante led Elian to the head table. He pulled out a chair for him. "Gentlemen," Dante said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the room. "Thank you for waiting. We heard you had a break-in, Valerius," Don Chung sneered from across the table. He was a thin man with a snake-like smile. "We were worried you were losing your touch." "A minor pest control issue," Dante said smoothly, sitting down. "The rat has been disposed of." "And the baggage?" Rossi gestured to Elian with a lit cigar. "You bring your pets to business meetings now. This isn't a cabaret, Dante." Dante's hand tightened on the table. The wood creaked. Elian placed a hand over Dante's fist. His fingers were cool and steady. "I'm not a pet, Mr. Rossi," Elian said. His voice was soft but clear. It cut through the smoke. "I am the reason Marcus is currently rotting in a cell instead of sitting at this table. I'd say that makes me a business asset." Rossi's eyebrows shot up. "The boy speaks." "The boy plays, too," Dante said, his voice low. "And he bites. I'd advise you not to test him." "We aren't here to discuss your love life," Ching interrupted. "We are here to discuss territory. With Marcus gone, the West District is up for grabs." "The West District is mine," Dante said flatly. "By what right?" Rossi slammed his hand on the table. "You have the North. You have the ports. You want the whole city, Wolf." "I want stability," Dante said. "And Marcus's territory is chaos. I will bring order." "Order." A new voice spoke. It was Silas, the oldest and most dangerous of the Dons. He sat in the shadows, watching. "You speak of order, Valerius, but your house is made of glass. You let a liability into your bed. A broken boy with a target on his back." Silas pointed a bony finger at Elian. "That boy is a weakness. As long as you keep him, you are vulnerable. The families cannot be led by a man who is distracted by a pretty face with a sad story." The room murmured in agreement. Dante stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You call him a weakness?" Dante snarled. "Dante," Elian said. Dante looked down. "Sit," Elian said. Dante hesitated, but he sat. Elian stood up. He felt the fear fluttering in his chest, a frantic bird. But the anger was stronger. He walked around the table. He walked toward the center of the room. There, on a raised platform, sat a grand piano. It was intended for background music, for the hired help. Elian walked up the steps. The room watched him, confused. "What is he doing?" Chung asked. Elian sat at the piano. He adjusted the bench. He looked at the sea of hardened criminals, murderers, and thieves. "You think I am weak because I was hurt," Elian said into the microphone stand near the keys. "You think scars make a person fragile." He touched the M on his neck. "Marcus thought that too," Elian said. "He thought he could break me into silence. But here I am. And where is he?" Elian placed his hands on the keys. "You want to know if I'm a liability?" Elian whispered. "Listen, Chapter 17, The Nocturne of Steel. He didn't play a lullaby. He played Liszt's Totentanz, the dance of the death. It was violent. It was percussive. It required a strength and dexterity that seemed impossible for someone so slender. Elian attacked the piano. He channeled every beating, every burn, every moment of terror in the dark into the music. The notes crashed through the ballroom like gunfire. He wasn't playing for them. He was playing at them. He was showing them the storm. Dante watched from the table, his heart swelling so much it hurt. He saw the awe on the faces of the other dons. They had expected a weeping boy. They were getting a hurricane. Elian's hands flew. His hair fell into his eyes. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The scars on his neck stretched and moved with his exertion, vibrant and undeniable. He played the chaos of the break-in. He played the silence of the tower. He played the love of the wolf. As he reached the climax of the piece, a series of thundering chords that shook the chandeliers, Elian looked up. He looked straight at Silas. He didn't blink. He poured his dominance into the music, demanding submission. I am not a victim, the music screamed. I am a survivor. I am the wolf's heart, and if you touch me, I will destroy you. He slammed the final chord. The silence that followed was deafening. Elian sat there, chest heaving, hands trembling on his lap. Then, one person started clapping. It was Dante. He stood up, clapping slowly, rhythmically. Then Lev joined in. Then slowly, begrudgingly, Silas stood up. The old Don looked at Elian with a newfound respect. He nodded once, and he began to clap. The room followed. It wasn't polite applause. It was the thunderous ovation of men who recognized power when they saw it. Elian stood up. He bowed. Not a servant's bow. A performer's bow. He walked down the steps. He didn't look at the floor. He walked straight to Dante. Dante pulled him into his arms, kissing him right there in front of the 5 families. He kissed him hard, possessive and proud. My pianist, Dante whispered against his lips. Your partner, Elian corrected breathlessly. Dante laughed. He turned to the table. Does anyone else have questions about my assets? Dante asked. Rossi cleared his throat. He looked at Elian, then at the piano. No questions, Rossi grunted. The West District is yours, Valerius. Just keep the music coming. Chapter 18, The Crown of Ashes. The drive home was different. There was no fear in the car. Elian sat in the passenger seat, his hand resting on Dante's thigh. The city lights blurred past, but they didn't look like prison bars anymore. They looked like jewels. You were incredible, Dante said, not taking his eyes off the road, but smiling. You terrified them. I think Silas is actually afraid of you. Good, Elian said. He touched the obsidian wolf at his throat. I'm tired of being afraid of them. Dante reached over and interlaced their fingers. You know what this means, Elian? What? We just declared war on the status quo, Dante said. We took the West. We united the families under fear and respect. We own this city now. Really own it. Elian looked out the window. He saw the reflection of his own face. The bruise was still there. The scars were still there. But the eyes were different. They were sharp. Then let's rule it, Elian said softly. They arrived at the tower. The lobby was repaired. The guards nodded with new deference as they passed. In the penthouse, the new window was installed. The room was pristine again. Dante led Elian to the balcony. They stepped out into the cold night air, 40 stories above the world. The wind whipped at Elian's white suit, but he didn't shiver. Dante stood behind him, wrapping his arms around Elian's waist, resting his chin on Elian's shoulder. Look, Dante said, pointing at the sprawling grid of Manhattan. It's all noise. But up here. It's music, Elian finished. He leaned back into Dante. Marcus said I was a bird, Elian whispered. He said he clipped my wings. Dante kissed the scar on Elian's neck. He was wrong. You aren't a bird, Elian. You never were. What am I? You're the storm that breaks the cage, Dante said. Elian smiled. He turned in Dante's arms, looking up at the man who had saved him, the man he had saved in return. Play for me, Dante asked. One last song for the night? Only if you stay, Elian said. Always, Dante promised. I'm not going anywhere. Elian walked back inside, the white suit glowing in the moonlight. He sat at the Steinway. He didn't play anger this time. He played something new, something he was writing in the moment. It was slow and deep and steady. It was the sound of a heart beating without fear. As the music drifted out over the city, weaving through the skyscrapers and the alleys, Elian realized the truth. The velvet choker was gone. The scars remained, but they weren't chains anymore. They were gold. He was Elian. He was the pianist. And he was free. End of Part 5. Part 6. The Unbroken Melody. Chapter 19. The Ink of Resurrection. 6 months had passed since the summit. 6 months of quiet power. The Valerius family held the city in a grip of iron, but inside the penthouse, the atmosphere was soft, filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the constant, flowing sound of the Steinway. But some ghosts lingered. Elian stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The steam from his shower was clearing, revealing his reflection. He looked healthier now. His ribs no longer poked through his skin. His eyes had lost that hunted, hollow look. He looked like a man who was loved, except for the neck. The cigarette burns had faded to silvery whispers, barely visible unless you looked closely. But the carving Marcus had left over his throat, was still there. It was a raised pink keloid scar. A brand. A signature of ownership that refused to fade. Elian traced it with his fingertip. Even now, with Marcus rotting in a supermax prison, the letter felt heavy. It felt like a leash. "You're staring at it again," a voice rumbled from the doorway. Elian didn't jump. He smiled at the reflection of Dante leaning against the doorframe. The wolf was wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoos that mapped his own history of violence. "I hate it," Elian admitted softly. "I hate that he left his initial on me. It's like, no matter where I go, he's still signing his work." Dante walked into the room. He stood behind Elian, wrapping his arms around his waist, resting his chin on Elian's shoulder. He kissed the scar, right over the jagged lines. "It's just skin, Elian," Dante whispered. "It doesn't mean anything. You are mine." "I know." Elian leaned back into the warmth. "But I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to wake up, look in the mirror, and see him." Elian turned in Dante's arms. He looked up, his blue eyes fierce with determination. "I want to cover it." Dante raised an eyebrow. "Makeup?" "No," Elian said. "Ink. Permanent ink. I want to overwrite him." Dante studied Elian's face. He saw the need for reclamation. This wasn't about hiding. It was about renovation. "I know an artist," Dante said slowly. "The best in the city. He doesn't usually do house calls, but for us, he will." 2 days later, the living room was transformed into a sterile studio. Hiro, a Japanese tattoo master with hands steady enough to perform surgery, set up his table near the window. The afternoon sun bathed the room in gold. Elian lay on the table, his head turned to the side, his neck exposed. The buzz of the tattoo machine was a low, angry hornet in the silence. Dante sat on a chair right next to him, holding Elian's hand. Every time the needle dipped into the sensitive skin of his throat, Elian squeezed Dante's fingers. "Breathe," Dante murmured, brushing hair off Elian's sweaty forehead. "You're doing great." "It hurts," Elian hissed through gritted teeth. "Pain is part of the process," Hiro said softly, wiping away a bead of ink. "To build something new, you must break the surface." Elian closed his eyes. He focused on Dante's thumb rubbing circles on his knuckles. He focused on the piano standing silently in the corner. He focused on the fact that this pain was his choice. Marcus wasn't doing this to him. He was doing this for himself. "What is the design again?" Dante asked, trying to distract him. "You'll see," Elian whispered. It took 4 hours. 4 hours of stinging, burning, scratching agony right over his windpipe. But Elian didn't cry. He didn't beg for it to stop. He lay still, anchored by the wolf's hand. "Done," Hiro announced finally. He wiped the area with a cool, soothing solution. "Sit up slowly." Elian sat up. His neck felt raw, pulsing with heat. Dante stood up. He looked at the work. His eyes widened, and his breath hitched in his throat. "Elian," Dante breathed. "It's..." Elian walked to the mirror Hiro held up. The M was gone. In its place was a masterpiece of black and gray shading. It was a music staff, the lines swirling elegantly around his throat like a collar of melody. But the notes weren't random. They were the opening chords of the piece he had played at the summit, Liszt's Totentanz. And right over the center, covering the thickest part of the scar, was a bird. Not a caged bird. A phoenix. It was rising from the lines of the music, its wings spread wide across Elian's collarbone, its beak open in a silent song. The tail feathers curled down to mask the last remnants of the burn marks. It was beautiful. It was defiant. It was freedom. Elian stared at it. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were happy tears. "He's gone," Elian whispered, touching the ink. The skin was tender, but the psychological weight was gone. "He's really gone." Dante wrapped his arms around Elian from behind, careful not to touch the fresh tattoo. "The phoenix," Dante murmured against his ear. "Rising from the ashes." "No." Elian corrected, looking at Dante's reflection. Rising from the music. Chapter 20, The Obsidian Ruins. A month later, on a Tuesday, Dante came home early. Get dressed, Dante said. Wear the black suit. The silk one. Elian looked up from his book. Where are we going? Another summit? No, Dante said. There was a glint in his eye, a mix of excitement and nervousness that Elian rarely saw. I have a surprise. A gift. You already gave me a piano, Elian laughed, marking his page. And a home. And a tattoo. This is bigger, Dante said. They took the limousine. The drive was long, heading toward the South District, back toward the old industrial zones where the clubs and the warehouses clustered like barnacles. Elian's heart began to beat faster as he recognized the streets. Dante, Elian said, his voice tightening. This is the way to the Obsidian Club. I know, Dante said. He took Elian's hand, squeezing it firmly. Trust me. The car turned the corner. Elian braced himself to see the neon sign of the club where he had been a slave. He braced himself for the memories of the velvet choker and the backstage beatings. But the Obsidian Club was gone. In its place stood a building that looked like it belonged in Vienna, not New York. The crumbling brick facade had been restored to a pristine, historical finish. The neon sign was replaced by a tasteful, backlit plaque in bronze. The Valerius Conservatory. Elian stared out the window. What is this? We're here, Dante said. The driver opened the door. Dante helped Elian out. They stood on the sidewalk. The air smelled of rain and new construction. I bought the building, Dante explained, gesturing to the structure. The day after I took you. I bought it, I gutted it, and I burned everything inside that reminded me of him. The stage, the dressing rooms, the bar, all gone. Dante led Elian to the heavy oak doors. He pushed them open. Inside, it wasn't a smoky club anymore. It was a cathedral of sound. The main floor had been converted into a recital hall with perfect acoustics. The bar was gone, replaced by a reception area for students. The upper levels, where the private rooms used to be, were now practice rooms, each soundproofed and equipped with a piano. It was bright. It was airy. It smelled of wood polish and hope. I know you miss the conservatory, Dante said, his voice echoing in the empty hall. I know Marcus took that from you. You can't go back to being a student, Elian. You're too good for that. But you can teach. You can play. You can own this. Elian walked to the center of the room. He looked up at the high ceiling. He remembered playing here when it was dark, choking on smoke and fear. Now, sunlight streamed through the skylights. You built me a school? Elian whispered. I built you a kingdom, Dante corrected. This is yours, Elian. The deed is in your name. You run it how you want. Free lessons for kids who can't afford them? Done. Masterclasses for the elite? Done. It's your stage now. Elian turned to Dante. He was overwhelmed. The magnitude of the gesture, turning a place of trauma into a place of creation, was staggering. Why? Elian asked, tears spilling onto his cheeks. Because, Dante stepped closer, wiping the tears away with his thumb. Music saved you. I want you to use it to save others. Elian looked around the hall. He imagined it filled with children, with music, with life. He imagined burying the ghost of the Obsidian Club under a symphony of joy. Thank you, Elian sobbed, burying his face in Dante's chest. Don't thank me, Dante growled softly, holding him tight. Just play for me. Inaugurate the hall. Elian pulled back. He wiped his face. He looked at the brand new Steinway sitting on the stage. Okay, Elian said. But you have to listen. Chapter 21, The Golden Performance. The official opening night of the Valerius Conservatory was the event of the decade. It wasn't just a Mafia gathering. It was a collision of worlds. The 5 families were there, yes, sitting in the private boxes in their dark suits. But the floor seats were filled with the city's elite, critics, philanthropists, artists. Dante had done the impossible. He had legitimized his power through art. Elian stood backstage. He was wearing a new suit, deep midnight blue velvet. For years, velvet had been his prison. Marcus had used it to choke him. Tonight, Elian wore a velvet jacket cut to perfection, soft and luxurious. He was reclaiming the fabric. He touched the tattoo on his neck. The phoenix. 5 minutes, Mr. Valerius, the stage manager whispered. Mr. Valerius. He liked the sound of that. Dante walked into the dressing room. He looked regal in a tuxedo, but his eyes were soft when they landed on Elian. You look dangerous, Dante said, admiring the blue velvet. I feel dangerous, Elian smiled. He checked his reflection. No choker. No fear. Just the tattoo and the obsidian wolf necklace resting against his skin. They are all waiting for you, Dante said. The critics are sharpening their pens. The dons are sharpening their knives. Let them, Elian said calmly. I have the piano. Dante kissed him. Break a leg, my love. Elian walked out onto the stage. The applause was polite, curious. The spotlight hit him, blindingly bright. He walked to the piano. He sat down. He adjusted the bench. He looked out into the darkness. He knew Dante was in the center box, watching over him like a guardian angel. Elian didn't play Liszt this time. He didn't play anger. He played an original composition. He called it The Wolf and the Phoenix. It started slow, melancholic, a melody that sounded like rain on a window pane, like loneliness. Then a bass line entered, heavy, dark, protective. The Wolf. The two melodies intertwined, fighting at first, then dancing, then merging into a harmony that soared. It was the story of their love. It was the story of being broken and put back together with gold. The audience was spellbound. The critics forgot to take notes. The dons forgot to posture. Elian played with his eyes closed, his head thrown back, the stage lights illuminating the music staff tattooed on his throat. He wasn't playing for approval anymore. He was playing because he could. When he hit the final note, a high, shimmering chord that hung in the air like a star, there was a second of absolute silence. Then, the room exploded. People stood up. Cheers erupted. It was a roar of adoration. Elian stood and bowed. He looked up at the center box. Dante was standing, his hand over his heart, looking down at Elian with a pride that burned brighter than the spotlight. Elian smiled. He wasn't just the pianist anymore. He was the king of the city, and his crown was made of 88 keys. Chapter 22, The Final Knot. After the concert, the after-party was held in the reception hall. Champagne flowed like water. Elian was surrounded. Critics wanted interviews. Donors wanted to shake his hand. Mr. Elian, a reporter shouted, "Is it true you're self-taught? Is it true you survived the fire at the old club?" "I survived," Elian said enigmatically, taking a sip of champagne. "And now I build." He felt a hand on his waist. Heavy, possessive, familiar. "Excuse us," Dante rumbled, steering Elian away from the press. "The artist needs to rest." Dante led him not to the exit, but to the private elevator that led to the roof of the conservatory. The roof garden was quiet, overlooking the skyline of the South District. The wind was cool, blowing away the heat of the performance. "You were perfect," Dante said, leaning against the parapet, pulling Elian between his legs. "I was nervous," Elian admitted, resting his hands on Dante's chest. "But then I thought of you." "I have something for you," Dante said. Elian laughed. "Another building? A tattoo parlor?" "No," Dante said. "Something smaller." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small black box. Elian's breath hitched. "Dante." Dante opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a collar, but not a velvet one, not a leather one. It was a thin, delicate band of white gold, encrusted with tiny diamonds. It was open in the front, designed to rest lightly on the collarbone, not to choke. And at the ends of the open circle were two small gemstones, one sapphire, for Elian's eyes, and one gray diamond for Dante's. "I told you I would never collar you again," Dante said softly, looking at the jewelry. "But I want the world to know. I want a symbol that isn't a scar." He looked at Elian, uncertain. "Is this too much? Is it too close to the past?" Elian looked at the gold band. It was beautiful. It didn't look like a restraint. It looked like a crown for his neck. "Put it on," Elian whispered. Dante's hands were gentle as he placed the gold band around Elian's neck. It sat low, resting against the tattoo of the phoenix. It felt cool and light. "It doesn't lock," Dante said. "It has no clasp. You can take it off whenever you want. You are free, Elian. Always." Elian touched the gold. It felt like a promise. "I don't want to take it off," Elian said. He looked up at Dante. The wolf looked at him with such naked vulnerability it made Elian's heart ache. "Marry me," Elian said. Dante froze. "What?" "Marry me," Elian repeated, stronger. "We have the building. We have the tattoo. We have the necklace. Let's finish it. Make me Elian Valerius on paper. Legally. Irrevocably." Dante stared at him. Then a slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. "You are proposing to the dawn?" Dante teased. "That's bold, pianist." "I learned from the best," Elian smirked. "Well, is that a yes, or do I have to threaten you?" Dante laughed, a deep, joyous sound that echoed over the rooftops. "Yes," Dante said. He pulled Elian in for a kiss that tasted of champagne and forever. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Epilogue, the forever note. 3 years later. The penthouse was noisy. It wasn't the noise of construction or war. It was the noise of life. A golden retriever puppy, Dante's ridiculous birthday gift to Elian, was barking at Arumba. In the kitchen, Lev was arguing with a caterer about the menu for the anniversary dinner. Elian sat at the Steinway in the corner. He was older now. The bruises were a distant memory. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. He wore a loose silk shirt. The tattoo on his neck peeked out, the phoenix wings vibrant against his skin. The gold collar Dante had given him glinted in the sunlight. The elevator chimed. Dante walked in. He had a few gray hairs at his temples now, marks of the crown he wore as the King of New York. But his eyes were the same, steel gray, softening only for one person. "I'm home," Dante announced, loosening his tie. The puppy ran to him. Dante scooped it up, but his eyes were on Elian. Elian stopped playing. He turned on the bench. "Welcome home, husband," Elian said. Dante walked over, dropped the dog, and kissed Elian. It was a routine, a ritual, the anchor of their day. "How was the conservatory?" Dante asked, resting his hand on Elian's neck, his thumb tracing the gold band. "Chaotic," Elian smiled. "We have a new student. A boy. 17. Runaway. He has talent, Dante. Real talent. But he's scared." Dante's expression darkened slightly, then cleared. "He's safe now. He's in your house." "I told him that," Elian said. "I told him wolves guard the door." Dante chuckled. "And what did he say?" "He asked if the wolves bite." And Elian reached up and pulled Dante down for another kiss. "I told him," Elian whispered against Dante's lips, "only if you threaten the music." Dante sat on the bench next to him. He placed his large, scarred hands over Elian's elegant ones on the keys. "Play for me," Dante asked. "The Wolf and the Phoenix." "Always," Elian said. He began to play. The melody filled the penthouse, drifting out the triple-paned windows, floating over the city they owned. The velvet was ashes. The scars were art. And the melody was unbroken. End of story. Thank you for reading The Pianist's Velvet Choker. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment Team Dante or Team Elian below. Your support keeps these stories alive. See you in the next dark romance.